My stepsister revealed she was pregnant for the fourth time the same way she always delivered life-changing news, casually, from the couch, while I was folding her kids' laundry. She smiled, one hand on her stomach, and said it like it was an update, not a burden she was about to hand me again. I remember the room going quiet. The TV kept playing cartoons. One child tugged at my sleeve. Another cried from the hallway. I felt something inside me finally stop trying. I had raised her children like interruptions were my responsibility. School runs, meals, late nights, missed plans. Everyone assumed I'd adjust. I always did. So this time, I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said I was leaving. An hour later, my phone rang. It wasn't family. It was the police, telling me my stepsister had reported me. Abandonment, she said. Standing outside my own home, lights flashing against the windows, I realized how quickly care turns into a weapon when you stop giving it away. I became part of my stepsister's life when our parents married, long before she had children, long before I understood how quickly responsibility can slide onto the quiet person in the room. I was younger, accommodating, the one who didn't push back. That made me useful. When her first child was born, it was temporary help. Just until she recovered. When the second came, it was circumstance. When the third arrived, it was expectation. By then, no one asked if I was available. They just handed me schedules, diaper bags, excuses. I didn't have kids of my own. People took that as proof I had time. I worked flexible hours, which they translated into always free. Family gatherings blurred into unpaid shifts. I learned the sound of her children's footsteps better than my own thoughts. My stepsister spoke about me like a resource, not a person. She's good with them. She doesn't mind. She said it with a smile that ended conversations before they began. Our parents nodded along, relieved someone else was handling the chaos. I told myself this was what family did. That being dependable meant being loved. But love that only flows one direction starts to feel less like love and more like obligation. The truth was, I was invisible until something went wrong, or until I stopped. And the moment I did, I learned exactly how replaceable I was to them, and how essential I'd been without ever being acknowledged. The disrespect never arrived loudly. It seeped in, thin and constant, until it felt normal. My stepsister stopped asking and started informing. "I'll be late. Can you keep them?" She said it while already grabbing her keys. If I hesitated, she'd pause just long enough to make me feel unreasonable. A glance over her shoulder. A sigh. Then, they're already used to you. At family dinners, plates were passed around while I stayed on the floor tying shoes, wiping hands, calming tears. Conversations continued above me. When I finally sat down, my food was cold. No one noticed. She joked about it in front of others. "You're basically their second parent." People laughed. I smiled because correcting her would have made things awkward. That was always the unspoken rule. My discomfort mattered less than their comfort. Plans I made were treated as flexible suggestions. You can reschedule, right? Birthdays, weekends, sleep. She said it kindly, which somehow made it worse. Kindness without respect is just control wearing a softer face. The night she revealed the fourth pregnancy, she didn't even look at me at first. She watched my reaction in the reflection of the TV screen, waiting to see if I'd adjust again. When I didn't say anything, her tone shifted. Careful, testing. "You'll help, though, right?" It wasn't a question. It was an assumption built on years of silence. And in that quiet moment, I realized they weren't asking me to support her. They were asking me to disappear, slowly, politely, and without complaint. The police car sat at the curb with its lights off, waiting. That was the moment everything became clear. I stood on the front steps, shoes half on, jacket still open, listening as an officer calmly explained why they were there. My stepsister had told them I stormed out and left her children alone. The words felt rehearsed, polished, like she'd been waiting for a chance to use them. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself right away. I looked past the officers and into the house. The kids were fine. Federation watched. Safe. Exactly as I'd left them, with our parents inside, fully capable adults who somehow didn't count when blame was assigned. That's when it hit me. My usefulness had finally turned into liability. The moment I stopped performing the role, they rewrote the story to punish me for it. I calmly showed the officer the messages. The timestamps. Her last text, "I'll be back late." No emergency. No abandonment. Just expectation. The officer nodded. The tension eased. No report filed. But something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in certainty. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't cruel. I had been convenient. Walking away from that house afterward, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not relieved, resolved. I understood then that staying would only teach them they could escalate consequences whenever I resisted. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. And once I realized that, there was no version of this story where I stayed and still respected myself. I didn't confront my stepsister after that night. Confrontation gives people something to argue with. I chose preparation instead. I reviewed everything that tied me to her children. School pickup authorizations. Emergency contact forms. Doctors' offices that had my number listed first. I worked in administration long enough to know how much weight paperwork carries. So I removed myself, cleanly, officially, and in writing. I sent polite emails. Short sentences. No emotion. Please update your records. I am no longer an authorized guardian. I attached ID where required. I kept copies of every response. Documentation is quiet power. I also stopped covering expenses I'd slowly absorbed without noticing. After-school fees, groceries meant for everyone, the little subscriptions that just made things easier. Nothing was announced. Autopay was simply turned off. I informed my employer I needed a fixed schedule. No more last-minute flexibility. I wasn't lying. I was protecting time I'd never been paid for. Finally, I found a small place of my own. Nothing impressive. Just peaceful. I changed my mailing address and updated my emergency contacts. I made sure no one could claim confusion later. This wasn't revenge in the way people expect. No public exposure, no raised voices, no dramatic exits. It was structure replacing chaos. By the time my stepsister realized I was no longer available by default, there was nothing left to negotiate. The role she had relied on didn't exist anymore. And without saying a word, I made sure it couldn't be assigned to me again. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, like a house settling after something structural has been removed. The first call came from the school. My stepsister's voice was sharp, confused. They said you're not authorized anymore. There must be a mistake. I listened without interrupting, watching rain slide down my window. Then I said, evenly, there isn't. Next came the doctor's office. Then the after-school program. Each time, she sounded more strained, less certain. Systems she'd never had to manage were suddenly hers alone. Forms. Deadlines. Pick-up times that didn't bend around her schedule. At a family gathering weeks later, I arrived on time and left early. No kids clung to my legs. No one handed me a bag on their way out. I sat with a cup of tea and noticed how quiet everything felt when I wasn't buffering the noise. My stepsister avoided my eyes. When she spoke to me, it was careful. Measured. As if she wasn't sure what authority she still had. I hadn't changed my tone, but the balance had shifted. The most telling moment came when she asked, softly, could you watch them for just an hour? There was a pause. A real one. I said no. Kindly. Simply. Nothing exploded. No accusations. Just an awkward silence that told me everything. The world didn't fall apart when I stepped back. It adjusted. And for the first time, the weight of her choices finally rested where it belonged, not on me, but on the person who made them. The fallout was quieter than anyone expected, but more effective than any argument or tantrum could have been. My stepsister's frustration became visible in subtle ways. The way she double-checked calendars, hesitated before leaving the house, and muttered under her breath when a pickup ran late. She had to manage systems she once assumed I'd absorb effortlessly. She realized, slowly, that I wasn't there to catch mistakes anymore. Our parents noticed too, though they never said it directly. Calls became shorter, tones more cautious, questions measured. They stopped assuming I'd rearrange my life around her needs. Even extended family sensed a shift. Comments about me being so helpful disappeared. Instead, they noticed how capable she had to be without me. For me, the stakes weren't revenge in a dramatic sense, they were about self-respect. I regained control over my time, energy, and boundaries. My reputation wasn't tied to endless labor disguised as care. My stepsister's perception of me changed too, not as someone to exploit, but as someone who would not bend to unreasonable expectation. Why should anyone care? Because most of us have been the quiet labor in someone else's life, the one assumed to absorb inconvenience and discomfort. The story matters because it shows that reclaiming yourself doesn't require anger or shouting. It requires clarity, calm, and consistency. And when that happens, the people who relied on your invisibility start to see the space they've taken for granted. And that realization, silent, undeniable, is often the most potent consequence of all. It's been months since I stepped back from the chaos that had become my life. I live in a small apartment, quiet, predictable, fully mine. The routines I once absorbed without question are no longer my responsibility. I don't have to track every meal, every pickup, every need that wasn't mine to manage. I've learned something essential. Boundaries are not cruelty. Saying no doesn't make me unkind. It makes me honest. The stepsister who once relied on me for every minor crisis now manages her own schedule, her own responsibilities, and the tension in our interactions has shifted. She still avoids overstepping, still chooses her words carefully, because she knows I will not automatically absorb what she expects. For me, the peace comes from control. From knowing that my time, energy, and care are given consciously, not extracted unconsciously. I don't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. I've stopped confusing utility with value. The future is quiet but intentional. I will continue to help when it matters, when it is asked and reciprocated, not when it is assumed. I will continue to live my life without guilt for putting myself first. Sometimes I think back to the day she revealed her fourth pregnancy, and I smile softly. Not in mockery, but in quiet satisfaction. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to yell. I simply stepped away, and in doing so, I finally showed everyone what my absence is worth. And that, more than anything, feels like freedom.